Hi, everyone, and welcome to an all-new Book It. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. We kick things off today with a book that charts American history through voices that haven't always been heard, women's voices. Writer and consultant Dana Rubin is here to talk about her book, Speaking While Female, 75 Extraordinary Speeches by American Women. Dana, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Carol Anne.
So as I understand it, this book came out of your own search for speeches by American women, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And what did you find initially?
Well, I've been a speechwriter for a long time and a speech consultant, and I repeatedly, over and over, heard people referencing speeches by men. Always speeches by men. I mean, whether it was Winston Churchill or John F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy or Martin Luther King or Frederick Douglass, always, always men, and I just started wondering, where were all the women?
And so what did you find when you went looking?
Well, I started a deep dive. I mean, I wouldn't say rabbit hole, I would say more like an opening, because it opened up this vast world that I knew nothing about. It's the world of women's oratory, women's speech through the centuries. I started looking at old manuscripts, archives, out-of-print books, online, old bookstores, looking for overlooked speeches by women, which I found by the thousands.
So what happened? How did we end up there? Did history ignore what women had been saying, forget what women had been saying?
Yes.
Yes to both?
In general, I mean, we know this, right? They're gatekeepers. There are editors, there are publishers, and these are the people who decide what goes in and what doesn't. And just think about throughout history, if an event was happening or a woman was speaking and a journalist wasn't there to record it, and an editor didn't care about it and put it in the paper, and a publisher didn't put it in the collection, then we never hear about it. So
Right.
Women have been speaking, it's just that people didn't care enough what they had to say to record their words and keep them for posterity.
So let's talk about some of the speeches in the collection. Particularly, I'm curious about the earliest ones. What's an example of one of the very early speeches you found?
Well, the book starts in 1637, and the first speech is by Anne Hutchinson. She was a preacher in the Puritan era, in what's now Boston. And she was moved by the Spirit, by her religious faith, to preach in her house. That was a big no-no.
Yes.
She got banished for that. And she had a heresy trial. They put her on trial, and at her trial, she spoke up in defense, in self-defense. And she said, I was moved by the Spirit to speak out. And of course, they banished her. We have her words, and those are in the collection. That's the earliest recorded written speech that we have by a woman.
I was struck by Emma.
In America.
In America, okay. I was struck by Emma Willard, who spoke to the New York State Legislature, I think it was 1819. She was basically advocating for women to have access to higher education, which I gather was fairly a radical idea at the time.
It was absolutely radical. I mean, women were not considered worthy of investment in study because they were just going to be working in the home. But Emma Willard was furious about it. She saw her brothers go off to school. She was intellectually curious, and she was furious. Why can't I get more education? So she conceived of this idea to have an academy for women, higher education for women. And the key idea is that the government would pay for it.
Right.
It wouldn't just be a private institution, but it was a public good, because she argued if women are more educated, they will raise more educated families. It will be good for the new nation.
Yeah.
Because after all, in 1817, 1819, it was a brand new nation still.
So tell me a little bit about Jane Johnson from 1855. Her words in the book are only, I think, about a page and a half, but they were very powerful.
Very powerful. Jane Johnson was a remarkable woman. She was an enslaved woman who was brought to the North with her master, her so-called owner, because he was going on a diplomatic assignment to Nicaragua. But she seized the opportunity in Philadelphia to break free. She was helped by an anti-slavery activist. And then there was a trial in court. And she spoke up with her own voice in the courtroom, and she said, I would rather die than go back. I would rather die than go back. And it's so moving to think about how difficult it must have been for her to stand up in a courtroom full of white people who had authority and power over her and use her voice, and she got off.
There are, of course, some very famous female speakers in the book, Eleanor Roosevelt, Michelle Obama. But who is someone that really strikes you, someone that we have not heard of?
Maybe Nan Yi. She was an indigenous woman who in the early 18th century was involved in treaty negotiations with the Anglo settlers. And we only have her words because they were found on a scrap of paper that was torn and faded in the Library of Congress.
Oh my gosh.
But she spoke, I think she's the earliest recorded Native or indigenous woman's words that we have. And of course, we only have them because an Anglo person was there to write them down, because most Native American women didn't have a written language. Sure. They had an oral language.
One other speech I wanted to ask you about, I was very moved by what you included from Mary Fisher, who delivered this stunning speech at the Republican convention in 1992, I think it was. So tell us a little bit about her.
Mary Fisher, she really is a remarkable woman. She's still living and
yes.
still very active. She's an activist and also an artist. But Mary Fisher was given a diagnosis of HIV/AIDS. I think it was AIDS because her husband, her ex-husband, had been an intravenous drug user. But she came from this very, I don't want to say conservative, but a very proper Republican
yes.
family with
yes.
conservative social values. I mean, it was unheard of at that time because AIDS was associated, mostly with drug users and gay men.
Yes.
And she stood up in front of the Republican National Convention and she said, I am also the face of this disease. And
yeah.
Are we human? If we are human, we must have a human response to this terrible disease. We should all be invested and all be involved in the tragedy and the search for a cure. And she actually has been a beneficiary of new medications, and she's been in good health all these years.
Donna, you have said that you want to set the record straight. So do that for us. Set the record straight.
Who made history in America? The nation that we live in and that we're all beneficiaries of living here. The nation that we know, our values, our ideals come from all kinds of people, not just white men, not just men, but all kinds of people with all kinds of identities. And if we want to address the challenges that we all face today, then we have to really hear from all those voices and inspire, encourage all kinds of younger people from different backgrounds to speak up, to step up and use their voices.
I know that this book is part of a larger project as well called the Speaking While Female Speech Bank. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, I became so obsessed with this topic, I mean truly obsessed, that I spent all my free time looking up speeches by women by the thousands, not just from the United States, but from around the world.
Right.
Right, and across time. I mean, from ancient times, from Roman times to the present. And I just put them all on this website as long as they were in the public domain. If they weren't, and I was able to, I secured copyright permission to publish them. And I put them on this website. There's thousands of them there, several thousands. They're organized thematically. And teachers are using it from the high school level up to the college level. Researchers are using it to supplement their course books and their textbooks and to broaden our understanding of really of who spoke and who helped change the world with their voice.
What a great resource. And people can just go on and look at that, right?
It's all free.
Okay, great. Just a last question for you, Donna. You dedicate your book to women speakers everywhere. In fact, you say, if you speak in public, this book is for you. And if you don't yet speak in public, this book is especially for you. So what is your message to women?
My message to all women of my age, of our age, to step up and use your expertise because the world needs to know what you have to say. But for younger women, for our children, our children's children, take advantage of the opportunities that you have. Gain confidence, step up and know that your voice really matters because our future is in your hands and we need to be the beneficiaries of your knowledge.
Donna, thank you so much for all this time. It was great to have you in.
Oh, thank you. It was really a pleasure.
Next, our Scott Kerbey sits down with Sidik Fofana, award-winning author and City College alum, to discuss his book, Stories from the Tenants Downstairs.
I think since the age of 8, my creative output was in the form of hip-hop verses. And I was always writing raps, always doing hip-hop. But all the while I was doing that, I always asked myself, what else would I do creatively if there was no such thing as hip hop? And it always came back to storytelling.
Recently, those storytelling skills won Sidik Fofana the prestigious Whiting Award for his book of short stories called Stories from the Tenants Downstairs. Fofana, who received his master's in education at City College, works hard to find the balance between writing and his 2 day jobs, teaching in CUNY's College Now program at City Tech and teaching high school English in Brooklyn.
My book is a collection of short stories that takes place in Harlem, New York, in a fictional apartment building called Banneker Terrace. And it features 8 residents, and each story is a story told from the residents' perspective. So it's 8 different tenants, 8 different stories. And as these tenants are telling their stories, about their personal struggles, there's also the looming horizon of gentrification and rent battles and things that are going on with the neighborhood, and it's changing.
This is Mimi, and I live in apartment 14D. Reading from my story, The Rent Manual. The slip is going to come in the mail like you do every month, and it's going to say balance.
Do you have a favorite character from the book?
When I think about Nan Yi and other students who are in the stories from the Tenants Downstairs, my heart's with them because they're based on a lot of people who've come through my classroom over the years. Every student is a character, and you learn quickly as a teacher that you deal with each student in a different way, and doing that has really informed my fiction. And it also, teaching has shown me that there are so many stories out there.
Do you think teaching has made you a better writer?
Oh, of course. It just gives me a sense of just groundedness. Brilliance and genius is everywhere. That's where I want to be. And not too many writers are public school teachers. And so in my most selfish moments, I'm like, oh my God, I have this all to myself. I can't believe I have all these stories to myself.
What do you hope people walk away with from this book?
I want people to just open it up and see 8 different people who are very distinct from each other, but then also share this communal bond. I love the idea of both types of reading experiences, like the experience of someone who could look at a character and say, that reminds me of someone I know, or a little bit of myself. And then I also love the idea of someone who's reading it and saying, you know what, I've never been to Harlem, New York, but somehow I can connect with the tale that this one resident is saying. I think that's the power of fiction, to just remind us that we live in different parts of the world, we live in different parts of the city, but at the end of the day, there are some things inside, there are some universal themes that connect us, whether we like it or not.
Do you have your students read your book?
I'm going to dedicate my time to helping young people and helping them pass tests and get into college and whatnot. And so the moment that spotlight comes on me, as much as it feels good, the idea of it feels good, of my students being proud of me and saying congratulations to me, I'd much rather be the person to read their writing, to read their essay and say, you know what, good job. That makes me feel a little better. So for me, just having the experience of being in the classroom, being with the sons and daughters of just everyday New York City people, it grounds me and it humbles me in a way that I can't walk away from that. So I would probably say I would never be a full-time writer, even if I had the choice. But maybe things would change if I ever had that choice. But it seems like a romantic thing to say right now that I'm going to stick to.
I'm Scott Kerbey for Book It.
Here on Book It, we love to hear how accomplished professionals in the book world got their start, and we hope you do too. Here's how I did it.
Hi, I'm Stefanie Newell, writing coach and developmental editor with more than 3 million views on YouTube. I've written over 15 books and ebooks, and I also work with first-time nonfiction writers on how to write, publish, and market their own books. Here's how I did it. So I got the idea for my debut novel, The Buzz When Celebrity Gossip Goes Wrong, while I was working a full-time job in corporate. I'm a mom, and I was going to school at the time, so needless to say, I was very busy. But what I did was I grabbed time wherever I could. So I had a commute to and from work, so I would write during that time. I would write on my lunch, and then when I got home from work and after I got settled from cooking and caring for my son, I would write until the wee hours of the morning. I did that for several years until I actually got the manuscript written, and then I went into the research phase where I was researching more information about the marketing part of it, the publishing part of it, until I got to a place where I felt comfortable enough to publish my book through Amazon. Since then, I've gone on to become the writing coach and developmental editor for a 2-time Grammy-nominated producer, a Hollywood film and television producer, as well as countless other nonfiction writers. And that's how I did it.
We are back with another edition of The Fine Print. Today we're talking about a topic that is getting a lot of attention right now, book banning. Joining us to discuss the issue is Lee Rowland, the executive director at the National Coalition Against Censorship. Lee, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Carol Anne.
So to start, can you give us a sense of an overview of what's happening right now in the country in terms of book banning?
Sure. We are, unfortunately not for the first time, and I'd love to say for the last time, in the middle of, frankly, a real national crisis of book banning, of trying to challenge books in both student, school, and public libraries, and basically remove books off the shelves for other people to read and enjoy.
I want to understand how the issue is tracked. We
Sure.
have book bans, we have book challenges. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. And they're often very related, and more so than they should be. So different school districts have different policies or processes for receiving a book challenge from an impacted student, a parent, or sometimes even folks outside of their community. And so an individual will file a book challenge to a particular title. And once that book is challenged, a district will have a process for reassessing whether that book should be part of a library collection or a curriculum. And so that's really should just be a challenge. One of the problems that we're seeing is a lot of school districts have a default process where the second a book is challenged, it's removed from the shelves.
Okay.
And so it's actually very difficult to track the individual numbers that have been banned, because sometimes books are de facto banned by the fact that they're challenged and then removed for 6 months. And so these challenges can languish for months.
Got it.
And in that time, a lot of time, the underlying challenge materials have been removed. So it is a ban in some ways. It's kind of a floating target, and therefore hard to track exactly how many books have been removed from our library systems.
And Lee, which books and who are most impacted?
Overwhelmingly, the titles that are challenged are books that are written by and written about Black and queer people, and of other marginalized groups as well. But in this moment, that's really where the focus is. And we see these challenges often part of an organized mass political act where people actually will come to a school district with a preset list of books that they would like removed from the library for everyone, right? And that would lead to a challenge. So sometimes we even have these batch challenges from folks who quite clearly have not read the material. And it's uniquely distressing because psychologists and experts tell us that particularly for young people struggling with their identity, whether they may be LGBTQ, whether they may be a person of color, seeing themselves reflected, right, in library materials, having diverse library collections is critical to their emotional, social, intellectual development.
We know that, yes.
So it's obviously, it's bad for reading in general. It's bad for all of us because we want diversity. We don't want to be taking books out based on a lowest common denominator, but it's also acutely harmful to students who lack the ability to see themselves reflected in those books, and specifically to see an organized political effort to remove titles from libraries with characters that reflect their experiences. That sends a really troubling, I think, and negative message that those kids don't belong, either kind of in our libraries or to see themselves reflected in their school environments.
You know, but Lee, there is the argument that some make that parents should have more control over what their kids have access to in libraries. And it is said that that is more about their parental responsibility than it is about censorship. So what is your reaction to that?
Well, look, I'm a civil libertarian, so I understand the idea of controlling your world. I understand that parents do have a right to decide what's right for their kids, for their families. Book banning isn't that, right? Most districts, the vast majority of districts, give parents a lot of power to decide what their children can access, both in terms of the curriculum or in terms of libraries. They can opt their kids out of certain titles, of certain types of books, right? Book challenges remove a book for everyone else's children. So even if you're acting on behalf of your child and challenging a book and saying, hey, I want this title out, you're actually harming another family's right to choose the books that they want to read for their family. So I really reject the parents' rights argument, because parents' rights are about deciding what's right for you, right? That's what liberty is, civil liberties. Book challenges try to tell other people what's right for their kids to read, and that's not liberty. That's an impoverishment of our educational resources.
And just one final last quick thought, Lee, what you would want people to know about this issue.
Well, I'd love people to go back and read some of the banned books that really have inspired us and helped make us realize the diversity of experiences that aren't like ours. I want people tuned in to their local school districts. They matter. Those races matter. Paying attention to who's running and voting in them, and being tuned in to the ways in which kind of culture war politics trickle into those local school districts. Pay attention. And third, groups like the National Coalition Against Censorship, we have organized efforts people can tap into. So for right now, for example, we are really bolstering our Kids' Right to Read network, which is one of the essential pieces in making sure that students, families, teachers, librarians on the ground have access to each other, have access to resources to fight back against the censors and make sure our right to read stays intact. And folks can find us, the National Coalition, or the Kids' Right to Read Network at ncac.org.
Lots to think about there, Lee. Thank you so much for all your time today.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming by.
Yeah.
Now we are going to head over to Linda Stasi for her always uncensored book reviews.
If you love nothing more than a great laugh at the, pardon the pun, expense of the global financial meltdown, and really, who doesn't, then The Mark and the Void by Paul Murray is the book for you. Who knew the soulless financial world could be so laugh-out-loud funny that I spit soda out of my nose? The action takes place in Dublin at an investment bank called the Bank of Tarabundo. Claude, a French innocuous business analyst, is approached by Paul, a failed novelist, whose only book, For the Love of a Clown, was the most abysmally reviewed book in maybe all history. Seemingly undaunted, Paul claims to want to write another book, a sort of an updated Ulysses. To do this, he wants to mirror Claude at work. Why? Because Claude is such a boring everyman. Paul has a killer sidekick, Igor the Russian criminal. They actually want to just rob the bank, not write a book. However, there isn't a vault because it's all digital magic. As one banker explains their job, if you do it in the bookies, it's a bet. If you pay some 23-year-old in an Armani suit $200 grand to go to the window for you, it's a derivative. There are enough characters for 100 spin-offs, and my first impulse was to do this review just in quotes from the book because they're so hilarious. So I'm going to give you a hybrid. Here are some of my favorite quotes. One German banker / former musician reminisces that we were regarded as being one of the best reggae and rocksteady crews on the Bavarian financial scene. Igor the Terrible says about Russian TV that Remington Steele is even bigger than Celebrity Gulag and Top 10 interrogation bloopers. In the midst of all this hilarity, are the horrifyingly true explanations of how investment bankers wreck the world economy for their own personal gain. The Hunter's Daughter by Nicola Solvenik is not our usual fare around here. It's a female detective story, yes, but Anna is not your usual small-town law enforcement officer. For one thing, she holds a truly terrible secret. She is the beloved daughter of the forest strangler, a man who, when she was a young girl, taught her everything about the forest, about hunting, and about a scary mystical monster who dwelt there. She loved him dearly, until he was nailed by the police as a massive serial killer who arranged his victims' bodies like works of art in the forest. Abandoned by her mother, she was adopted and got a new identity. But what happens when the supposedly executed forest strangler strikes again? It's good, taut, and tingly. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stasi.
That wraps up another chapter for us. Thanks so much for being here. We'd love to know what you think and what you're reading, so please check us out on social media. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. We'll see you next time on Book It.